right, welcome to Healthy for My Purpose. Today we have a really interesting topic. I know a lot of people are always wondering about their kids and where the children and the family fit in, but we have the great Dr. Monica and Mavern. Is that how you say the last name?
Davern. It's like tavern with a
Davern,
D. Yeah.
Davern. And we're going to be talking about all things plant-based, family, and navigating picky eaters, you name it, all the questions you've had on your heart, we're going to talk about it today. So let's just jump right in. Dr. Monica, tell us a little bit about just your own plant-based journey and how you kind of got your place as a mom and figured out, wait a minute, there's this need out there that parents need to kind of figure out how to do this journey. So just tell us a little bit about your story and your parenthood and your mom journey and how you
Yeah,
helping
absolutely.
families. Yeah.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. It's really just so fun to be here. I love talking about this. I could talk about this all day.
Mhm.
Yes, so hi, I'm Monica Davern. I'm a pediatrician in the Denver area, and I have two little boys, and I've been fully vegan, plant-based for almost 9 years. I can't believe
Mhm.
it. It goes by so fast. And so I think like when my husband and I were first sort of figuring this plant-based journey out for ourselves, we didn't have kids yet.
Mhm.
We were, living in the Bay Area, super into our endurance sports, our athletics. My husband and I do triathlon and ultra races and stuff. And so, like many people, we sort of discovered this lifestyle and our performance just got so much better. We felt so wonderful. I kind of watched my husband age backwards. And so we went all in on it like almost immediately, and we never really looked back. And so we were, just really interested in being as healthy as possible. And we followed Dr. McDougall pretty closely. I actually had the opportunity to train with him in residency for a while when I was doing my residency in pediatrics. And for those of you that don't know Dr. McDougall, he is the founder of something called the Starch Solution that is a diet that's based on, very heavy starchy foods. Like not it's heavy on starchy foods, I should say. So like potatoes, root vegetables, complex carbs, very low salt and almost no fat at all. No oil, no fat. And for us as athletes, that was like magic because on a diet like that, you're, eating a ton of nutrient variety and nutrient dense foods. And, you're able to maintain lean muscle mass without even thinking about it. You're really able to fuel well. Um, and so that was sort of where we were. We lived in that space for 4 or 5 years, and then we had kids, like, fast forward to 4.5 years ago, when we had my son, and he, when he started eating solid foods, we sort of had this pause moment where like, okay, all of a sudden he was like not growing as well as we thought he would, and he was just sort of like smaller, even though he was super smart and developing amazing, like we were worried about him not gaining enough. And so it sort of like put me in this weird space as a mom where I was like, well, I'm good at this. Like, I know pediatrics. I know what vegan nutrition is. Like, why is my son tiny?
Mhm.
And he was really picky as well. And so it sort of like spurred this kind of deep dive into how to get him to grow and how to have meal times be really fun. I think for a long time, I was that mom that was just like you said, okay, time to eat lunch. And like I would almost be brought to tears because it was so stressful to feed my son. And like I just wanted him to eat and he just didn't want to. And so sort of through that process, I kind of figured out like, okay, I think I know how to help people going through this and have kind of created a program to help people with that. And now my kids are doing great and they eat really well. But I think we have to realize as grown-ups that our kids' needs on this journey are just very different than ours. And
Mhm.
so, a diet that's super low in fat isn't necessarily going to meet their caloric needs. And they need a little bit of processed foods to sort of get the eating process started. And so I think just kind of realizing a few of these nuances has been super helpful.
Yeah, when you described your story and you were talking about endurance, being an endurance athlete, I'm trying to stay on topic here because I could just go down a path of talking about endurance sports because I'm a cyclist. I've done triathlons, but my
Ah,
heart's in
cool.
cycling, and I've done some long distance bike races and stuff. But as far as like families go, um, you know, talk about like meal planning, for families. Like,
Sure.
Yeah, how important is meal planning and kind of how would one go about planning the meals for kids on a plant-based diet?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I think it's sort of like before we can talk about meal planning, we kind of have to talk about understanding like what the nutritional needs are, like how the first question is sort of like how to create a balanced meal that's going to actually satisfy what your kids need. And sort of like once you have that foundation, then the meal planning gets a lot easier because I think a lot of people are sort of like, okay, well, I can choose what we're going to eat, but they might have a lot of questions around like, is this going to be the right thing for my child at this stage of their life? And so I think you just have to remember, like, the way that I recommend doing this is like this, I guess it's called the 3 Fs, is sort of like what the name has evolved into, but it's like choose one familiar food, one thing that they like that you know for sure that they're going to eat. Of course, keep it plant-based. So, you can rattle off probably a handful of these for your kids, like sweet potatoes or
Mhm.
hummus or, green peas or strawberries, whatever. So one familiar food and then a fresh food. So like the familiar could also be like wheat thins or Ritz crackers or something that you know for sure they're going to eat. And then the fresh, so same thing, like simple plant-based, single ingredient, kind of like all those ones I just listed. And then the family meal is the third one. So like if you're doing all three, then for sure you're going to be hopefully cooking one meal for everybody. And then you're also going to be putting things on the plate that's not going to overwhelm your child and make them just sort of like throw a fit and decide that they're over it and that they're not going to eat. So I think like once you have that framework, then you can kind of think about, okay, whatever the family meal is going to be. And so I really like to teach this as like a 5-minute process because I think the simpler we can do everything, the better. But really you're just going to like lean into the things that your kids like already. So if you have, you can do this like with sticky notes or you can just do it on a journal or whatever. But I tell people like set a timer and say, okay, write down for 1 minute. I'm going to write down all the whole food plant-based foods that my kids already like, that they're already eating. So corn on the cob or mashed potatoes or, whatever. Those beans in a can that you cook with, when you grill, I don't even, baked beans, sorry.
Mm.
So you can make like a huge list of all that stuff, pineapple, whatever. And then the timer goes off, and then you're gonna do it again, and you're gonna write down all of like the family meals that you already know how to cook and that are already sort of acceptable to your family. So pizza, tacos, lasagna, casserole, chili, whatever. And you're gonna do that again. And then at the end, you just get to like sort of mix and match. So you have this whole list of foods that your kids are already enjoying, and you can sort of just put together. So like sweet potato, black bean, avocado tacos,
Mm.
something like that. And so then you have, you can lay out the framework for your whole week. And I do think that it's important. And I think really it's because so many families in this anymore are just like in the thick of it. Like it is so hard to be a working mom. It is so busy when you come home at 5 o'clock. That if you don't have a plan and you're sort of like new to this lifestyle, it's
Mhm.
so much harder to be successful. And so I think like having it all laid out in a way that's simple, sustainable, doable for your family is, critical, can kind of change the game for families. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So let's pivot a little bit from there because I know when you're able to really master the meal planning and you get into a rhythm, things are going well. But let's talk about when you're not at home, when you're traveling.
Mm, okay.
I know you talk a lot about, you know, you have a lot of pro tips on how you can travel with your family because how do you take this meal planning system on the road? You know, so
Yeah.
give us some tips like for parents who are like, we're going to Disney, we're going on a family vacation, but we still want to maintain,
Mhm.
the plant-based essentials. How do you do that with kids?
Oh,
With
yeah.
how do you do that with a family?
Yeah, totally. Well, I
Yeah.
think number one, you kind of have to go into it knowing like what your boundaries are, right? So like somebody like me or you, Sersie, or probably Gigi too, I don't know, but like, we're all in on this. Like, I don't think that I would ever go on vacation and be like, well, on Saturday night, we're all just gonna like go to Olive Garden and everybody can eat what they want. But some families are at that point in their journey, and that's completely fine. And so I would say like before you embark on a journey like this, like you kind of just need to know where your limits are. Are you somebody that's like, okay, I'm going to keep my family 100% plant-based even on our trip? Or are you somebody that's going to sort of like allow for some wiggle room in the lifestyle? Um, and so that's kind of number one. And then number two is just being as prepared as you can. So for our family, we almost always book like a place with a kitchen. So like we don't really stay at hotels much. If we do, it's like an all-inclusive or something that I know is going to have some options for us. Number two, plan ahead as much as you can because travel days are long no matter what kind of diet you're on. So I really like to get grocery delivery. So I'll like look ahead, you know, you can plan it ahead. Like when you book your place a few days before, you can actually like shop and get your whole grocery list for the whole week and have it delivered to your accommodation, I guess is the right word. Like have it delivered to your Airbnb or wherever, and it's there waiting for you or arrive shortly after you do. And that's huge because then it really allows you to kind of like take the reins and say, okay, I know exactly what we're eating for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We can prepare, we can, you know, plan ahead. I always pack lunch boxes like on our flight wherever we go because we're going to use those like every day of the trip to just have lunch ready before we leave the house. And then I always like to kind of get a sense of what the vegan options are in the area. So if there's anywhere that we can go out, it's always fun to go out, but just to kind of know like, okay, at this brewery, they have like a vegan pizza or, you know, this place is actually a really well-known vegan restaurant and we should totally check it out. And so you can kind of pencil in some of those activities. And I think it's really helpful. You know, we generally travel with a ton of snacks and like easy, convenient foods that we can just kind of pull out whenever we're on the go. And then I think like you kind of have to know that you're going to make a few concessions at some point. So, you know, like when we were in Alaska this summer, for example, there's this area in Alaska called the Homer Spit, which if you haven't been there, it's like, it was the best trip of our life. It was super fun. But on the Homer Spit, it's a 1-lane road down. What a spit is basically like a stretch of land that has ocean on either side of it. So it's super cool. Like you walk down this strip and like it's, you know, I'm pretty sure it's Pacific Ocean to the north and Pacific Ocean to the south, but it's just this vast area. And anyway, there was a car accident on that road. Shortly after we got into the spit, there was an accident that shut down the whole road. So we were stuck there for like 8 hours. And, you know, we made do. Like it was fine. We were able to go out to dinner. I ordered like pasta with veggies for my son. He ate some, like it was no big deal. So I think just kind of having a little bit of tranquility about the fact that there's always going to be situations that you can't control can really like make or break your whole trip, you know?
Yeah. So what are some of your favorite travel snacks that you typically pack? Like what does that look like?
Oh, that's a good question. Let's see.
Or
Well,
your
we're
plane box
handle
or your lunch box.
Or your
what's in our lunch
lunchbox, yeah.
boxes. Okay, so usually before we leave, like let's say we're going to take a flight tomorrow, my husband and I will do like a big haul of like food prep. So we'll make a bunch of sandwiches, a bunch of different kinds, like peanut butter and jelly, or I like hummus and jelly. Don't judge me, people think that's weird. Or
Hummus and jelly,
like
wow.
avocado and cheese
Hummus and
sandwiches,
jelly.
vegan cheese. What? It's good. Yeah, I know. Anyway, or whatever, like just like sandwiches or wraps with like a nice tortilla. My kids are really into those like chickpea poofs. We call them cheesy poofs. And just like snack foods that I know they're gonna eat that are gonna be comfortable for them to eat. Because I think the other thing that we have realized is that when they're on a plane or in a situation where we're traveling, the familiar foods become extra important. Like, you know, for whatever reason, maybe it's that there's just a lot of change, there's a lot of new environments and stuff. Like they really don't want foods that they've never seen before. They won't even touch them. Like foods that we would normally expect them to at least try on a flight, they're not even going to go there. So we really lean into like bananas, fresh fruit, you know, crackers, like stuff like that, that we know is just going to get them the calories that they need. Often I'll make like a big batch of mac and cheese and just put it in like a Tupperware and maybe mix in like some green peas or broccoli or something. And they usually do pretty well with that. And then my kids love like the Z bars and fig bars and all the stuff that comes in a package, you know, that you can get at Costco or whatever. But those are sort of like the easy go-tos that we usually travel with. But I really like their lunch boxes, which are just like a bento box where it has like, you know, 5 compartments and you can put a few choices in there that they can feel comfortable choosing from, you know?
So when you're feeding your kids, are you looking like at the macronutrients of like their plate? Like, are you looking at like, you know, because you mentioned getting their calories up. Is it like making sure they always have like nuts and seeds and avocado, that kind of thing, or how do you do that?
Yeah. So I usually try like one healthy fat. So whether that's like a nut butter or hummus or avocado, something like that. A healthy fat, some whole grains. So, let's say an avocado sandwich. That would kind of both of those. And then a bunch of fresh fruit and fresh veggies if I can sneak them in. And then of course I always include like something that's a little bit processed and familiar just because frequently that's sort of the gateway to getting them to eat at all. And so as long as those other things are there, they'll make their way. Like they'll run out of whatever the processed thing is, and then they'll maybe try their strawberries or blueberries and then kind of experiment with other things too.
Okay, so there's oils in those snacks, the snack food
Yeah,
to get the
yes.
fat. Okay.
I'm not afraid of oils for kids, and I think they can actually be really helpful.
Yeah.
And it's funny because like I always thought, oh, oils are so toxic, oils are so bad because I kind of like quote unquote grew up with the McDougall mindset that oil is like toxic. And I think from a calorie density perspective, like if you're trying to reverse disease, oils should be avoided, sure, because it's super concentrated calories and it is a very processed food. But if you're raising a child that's constantly growing, that absolutely needs fat for brain development and needs calories because maybe their attention span doesn't allow them to sit at the table for more than 5 minutes, oils are your friend, absolutely. And so I think using them judiciously can be very helpful, especially if you are committed to being plant-based, but you have a child that's not growing very well or growing as fast as you'd like them to. I think oils can be really helpful.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, sure.
Awesome. So let's talk about, I think this is probably one of the biggest ones for a lot of parents. And I know you talk a lot about it on your blog, and just in your groups and things, the picky eater. You have a slogan that you say that you have to give picky eaters grace, but just talk about how you kind of guide parents to help them with picky eaters, because it could be a frustrating process. And then talk about too the idea that you said to give picky eaters a little bit of grace. I did like that concept. So just talk a little bit about picky eaters in general.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So first of all, it's important to know that there's like a really big spectrum of picky. Okay. And I feel like for the most part, when I'm talking about this, I'm kind of talking about the kids that are like quote unquote picky, not the kids that are like highly selective, whatever. But there's a whole spectrum. And I think no matter where you are on that, it's important to remember a few things that like number one, as an adult, you cannot force a child to eat. You just can't do it. And I think the sooner that we realize that, kind of the easier the whole process gets. And also to remember that like eating is a skill in and of itself. And so, in my practice, like when I see parents who are about to start baby-led weaning, or they have a 4-month-old or a 6-month-old, and they're like, yeah, what should we do? How do we start the process? The thing that I tell them is like, what I want you to do is set up the environment for them to eat and get super messy and enjoy and explore and like make sure they're in a safe zone. Like make sure that you've set them up so they're not gonna like flop out of the high chair or something, but like basically you're gonna set it all up and then back off as much as possible. Like, put them in their high chair, make sure they're good to go, put a little applesauce on their tray, give them a spoon, and then like go make yourself a snack or like check an email or something, because the process of eating itself is a skill that we have to learn over time. And these babies that are like frequently getting interrupted, or like mom's taking the spoon and putting it the right way or wiping their face or whatever, like they just don't like that. It's a lot of pressure and it's not very fun to like try and learn something when you're constantly being interrupted. And so I feel like the kids that do the best are the ones that have like the least amount of interference with the process. So that's kind of step one, to like lay the foundation so that hopefully your kid doesn't have any kind of an aversion to sitting and eating. And then the second one is sort of like managing your expectations, because, as kids are little, like when they're really young, we may expect them to sit for a whole 30 to 45-minute meal. And they're just not hardwired to do that yet. And so I think realizing like by the time your kid arrives to the table, you should have their food in front of them and ready to go. Like don't put your kid at their table and then finish making the pasta and then come over with it 10 minutes later. Like they're going to be out of there before you even can start. So I think realizing like, okay, I'm going to set my expectations. I know like what am I going to define as success, here at the table. And then the third thing I think is realizing that the process of learning how to eat is like 32 steps. It's a lot. So if you remember, like when you were pregnant and you walked into a room where there was food present, like whether you smelt it or you could hear somebody eating or someone was eating a snack or something, if it was not the day for you to eat, like that would just fully affect your whole body. Like, okay, I am not doing this. I got to get out of here. I'm so sick. And so I think that's a good way to remember, like the process of eating actually starts like the moment that you enter into a room where there is food around. And so, if your kid is tolerating food around, like they've already won, that step is complete. And so we get really picky and we get really, angry or worked up about our kids not eating every bite on their plate or not trying something that we put on their plate. But it's actually a huge win if you have something that you've served and your kid is just ignoring it. And so I've heard a friend of mine who's also a pediatrician that's plant-based will say, her name is Dr. Ann Dudley, and she'll say, like, I expect them to eat one, play with one, and ignore one. And so I think that's a reasonable way to define like a successful meal. And so I think a lot of it just has to do with the way that we see our children at meal times. Like, I don't know if there's necessarily any actual picky kids or, well, it's hard because I like to use that term, but I don't like it also because I feel like we're just labeling them. We're kind of setting ourselves up for this power struggle. But I think the less we can actually make it about what they're eating and more about connecting with our kids at meal times, kind of the easier it all goes. And the more we back off, kind of the better for them. Long story short.
That's awesome. Yeah. So what about like for parents who have kids who are like always sick? Like what tips do you have for helping them to boost their immune system? And they may be plant-based or they may not be. Like what are some strategies that a parent could use to boost a child's immune system, or do they just live with that?
Man, it's tough. I do feel like, so it's funny because I've always sort of like bragged about how healthy our kids are, and they are really, really healthy. I feel like this season in particular, I've been like the one that's stressed out and not sleeping, and so I keep getting sick and like bringing it to them. But they actually respond and they bounce back like much faster than I do. And I'm sure it's because of what they're eating. I think like as we minimize like these processed foods, kind of just focus more on like whole food, plant-based, they're going to get the nutrients that they need. And so kind of the rule of thumb that I like to tell people is, I think in general, society is like obsessed with protein, but for kids, I would rather that people are obsessed with fiber because number one, fiber only comes from plants. And if you're focusing on getting enough fiber, then you're sort of inherently going to get all these amazing micronutrients that have these like sort of superpowers that kind of come with it. And so the AAP guideline is age plus 5 is the number of grams of fiber per day. So if you have a 5-year-old, they need to just be eating 10 grams of fiber per day, which is not a ton, but it's some, and it makes, it'll make sure that you get some plants on the plate. So I think that's the biggest one. The other really important vitamin that we just don't get enough of in our diets, no matter who you are, is vitamin D. And there's a ton of data to suggest that vitamin D and immunity really go hand in hand. And so like outdoor time is just super important. I think like, as much time as you can get outside is super helpful. We participate in a program called 1,000 Hours Outside. I don't know if you guys have heard of it. It's really cool. It's like a movement and there's an app where you can track, your time outside with your kids, and it's 1,000 hours in a year. So it averages out to almost 3 hours a day. Which is a ton. Like if you have kids that are napping in the afternoon, you really have to prioritize this outdoor time. But I would say that's probably the number one thing that is keeping my kids healthy most of the time. Like the food that we feed them, of course, but outdoor time, minimizing stress, make sure that they're sleeping, other things that are great for immunity, obviously like vitamin C, zinc, whole food, plant-based stuff, I think kind of is the biggest one.
Are there any specific foods that, or just the whole kingdom of the plant?
I think variety. I think the biggest thing is avoiding like these animal products that already are going to come with, antibiotics, bacteria, viruses, growth factors, all that stuff that really affects the immune system, and affects sort of our ability to kind of overcome illness, So I think a vegan diet inherently kind of excludes the foods that are going to contribute to frequent illness, but it's also bringing in and including a bunch of other nutrients that are really going to augment or like help with immunity and stuff. So.
Okay, so we're just going to pivot a little bit. I know that I read one of the articles that you had. You talked about children with ADHD. And I used to work in the in a school that a lot of parents were struggling with their children with ADHD. And
Mhm.
you talk about certain minerals and vitamins that, or even other things that you can do or that you can do to actually help with those symptoms. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, totally. So, it's really cool because where I am in primary care, we basically treat ADHD first line with supplements. And most of the time, people come in with concerns for ADHD relatively early. Like, I think anymore, so many adults have been diagnosed. They're like, oh, I see it in my kid, and I know that she has ADHD, and she's only 5. And it's hard because, like, a 5-year-old is not going to sit still, and a 5-year-old is not necessarily going to want to complete a task in a certain order. So it becomes a little bit difficult to evaluate at that age. However, if they're concerned about it, we'll still do the evaluation. But in the meantime, I put them on supplements because there's so much evidence to say that these vitamins and minerals are helpful for brain development and for focus. So um, let's see. The first one is iron. So I think anybody on a plant-based diet has probably considered an iron supplement at some point. Iron in general, I think, is a great supplement for everybody because it's kind of fussy the way that the body absorbs iron. You need it to go in with some vitamin C. You need to have it at a time of day where you're not having a ton of calcium because they compete with each other for absorption. So iron is helpful almost like no matter who you are. So I have no hesitation starting kids on iron, even if they're not anemic, because it's helpful. And it is difficult to absorb too much. I mean, that being said, I think I've said this before, but iron is like the #1 accidental overdose for kids in this country because frequently they come in like gummies or whatever. So be careful, like, make sure it's a reasonable dose for your child and don't overdo it. But I think a little bit of an iron supplement can be really helpful for ADHD symptoms. The other one is zinc. Zinc is wonderful for so many things: immunity, brain function, cell damage repair, things like that. Zinc is super helpful. And zinc can also be helpful if your child is picky, because when you're deficient in zinc, everything just sort of tastes like cardboard. So frequently, like with cancer patients or whatever that are on these, they're just super nauseated and not eating much. They frequently are zinc deficient. Excuse me. And when we supplement them, they end up eating a little bit better. So zinc is helpful. Iron, vitamin D, like we talked about, is super helpful. And you can either do that through a supplement or time outside. I think one thing to remember is that all milks are fortified with vitamin D. Dairy milk does not just intrinsically have vitamin D in it. So you're going to get fortified vitamin D, whether you're getting it from dairy milk or through a plant-based milk. So that's just something to remember, but it is a good source. Sorry. And let's see. We said iron, zinc, vitamin D, omega-3s, the data behind those is sort of plus minus, but omega-3s can be helpful. I think it's worth a shot. There's some data to suggest that even if you put a kid on a supplement, if you put them on omega-3s as well, their optimal dose is lower. So like if they would have required 30 milligrams per day of a medication, maybe they'll get by with 10, something like that. So I
Yeah.
think those are the big ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I read a study, you may have come across it too, or maybe a few studies that link the correlation between um, a diet, like a standard American diet that's high in ultra processed foods to ADHD. Um, and so when you're, working with patients, is that kind of part of, I don't know if you've heard that, first of all, have you heard that or do you know
Yeah.
anything about that? Okay.
Yeah, sure, for sure.
Yeah. Is
Yeah, and
that
a lot of
part?
that has, oh, go ahead.
No, no, I was just going to ask, is that part of like when you're working with families to talk about diet? Or are you just working with families who are just, following a plant-based diet?
Oh no, I work with all kinds of kinds. I would say though, like the population at the clinic where I work is very, I would call them in general like plant forward. Like it's a bunch of very
Mhm.
progressive people and it's like an integrated practice. So people are generally interested in this anyway. I think it'd be a little bit different if I were, in Oakland where I trained for residency, where most of the families are underserved, eating whatever they really can afford,
Mhm.
and ultimately sort of like a lot of these health issues are kind of consequent to the system, unfortunately. But yeah, I'd say people are really open to it. And I think it's pretty obvious. Like I think that there's a ton of processed foods. We know that like these artificial flavorings and artificial dyes have been linked to ADHD as well. And I think it becomes really difficult because like anybody who's exposed to these hyperpalatable foods wants the hyperpalatable food, right? I mean, any child, if you offered them a Twinkie versus like a carrot stick, they're going to eat the Twinkie. That's what they want. And that's in our human nature, because historically we need calories and, we need fat. And so we like sugar and salt, and hyperpalatable foods are the normal thing that any person would choose without thinking about it. And so it becomes really difficult because like it's almost like a self-fulfilling like circuit where they eat the hyperpalatable foods, they become dysregulated for whatever reason. Maybe it's like a spike in their blood sugar, then they crash, and then they become really selective and want to go back to the hyperpalatable food. And then the whole process sort of starts again. And so it can be really difficult. Like patients that have really, really selective eating behaviors, like kids with autism spectrum disorder, are frequently eating a handful of foods per day, and it's the same 5 things that they'll eat, or maybe it's the same 2 or 1 thing that they only want that one thing. And so then that results in sort of these nutritional imbalances that actually make their autism symptoms worse. And so it's really hard to break that cycle. But when we're able to do it, we have seen, there are studies that have shown like really great results from a plant-based diet in these cases. So, what we're feeding our kids really matters. And I would say, just as a mom, and of course I'm gonna brag about my kids, but I feel like my kids are really smart. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that they're eating foods that are allowing them to continue to progress and grow. And so I think like a lot of kids that end up being sick or end up dealing with these issues or respiratory issues, missing school, like you don't do a lot when you're sick. And our kids are no different, right? Like if a kid has to be in the hospital, they're really missing out on these developmental opportunities. And so I think just keeping them healthy actually solves a lot of issues in general. But again, I'll advocate for time outside, because I think time in nature for kids it can just be like a game changer,
I want to go back a little bit because, we have a lot of different women in our group with different situations as parents. Some are grandparents just trying to give their kids a little more veggies. Some of them are trying to transition their families. But I want to go back to, you talked a little bit about the autism. What about parents, like you said, who have those special need kids who are only eating those, so they're not getting the variety? What are some steps that type of parent can take to elevate that child's diet with their limited capacity in terms of what they're eating? It's, like you said, they have the 5 things that they want to eat, the texture matters, they don't like the texture of this, the feel of this. And so how does a parent like that navigate giving their kids more healthier options in that setting?
Yeah, I think that's really, really tough and almost a little bit beyond the scope of like my expertise. But I think like working with a really great feeding therapy team is the thing that can be super helpful. And it's tough because a lot of times these kids will, like, for example, there was a kid that I remember from residency who only wanted strawberry Dannon yogurt. Like if you were to give him a strawberry banana, like he wouldn't. It could be the same brand, same yogurt. Like he only wanted what he wanted. And at that point, it's really tough. I mean, you can try to introduce or sneak stuff in, but I think like sometimes it really takes a skilled professional to sort of help you like with those little baby steps of trying to get things to work. And so for those families, I would really recommend like a speech therapist, occupational therapist, or a feeding therapy team who can work with your child on their individual level and just sort of help you get to a place where there is a little bit more variety and they can kind of make a path for you that's a little bit more clear. And, in my expertise, I don't deal with those families so much because I think that there's just so many other factors. A lot of it is like sensory processing, or maybe there's some sort of a motor delay or the way that their mouth works and the anatomy. And so all of it kind of plays together. And so I think those feeding therapy teams can be really helpful.
Awesome. So just one last question before we just get into some of the work that you're doing. So what are some key nutrients that parents have to make sure their children are getting if they're going to fully transition their child to a plant-based diet? Is it just like adults? Is there a special thing for children? Just give us the top things that parents should look out for and have to be aware of.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so if you're gonna like, we're gonna talk as if you're gonna like fully jump in, this is like cold plunge, you're going for a vegan diet and you're not looking back. So number one is B12. So just like adults, kids also need to be a B12 supplement. Most of the time, if you're gonna give your kid a multivitamin, it's gonna be in there in a dose that's appropriate for your child. B12 is a bacteria-derived vitamin, so only bacteria make B12. And so that means that it's on the soil. So the reason that vegans need B12 in a supplement is that anymore, like all the fruits and vegetables that we are eating are so sanitary that like all the B12 ends up just getting washed off. And so people that eat animal products get B12 sort of secondhand because the animals are grazing on grass or whatever it is, soil, like that's contaminated with the soil that does contain B12. So like non-vegans basically are getting it either from dairy milk or from meat in that way. So B12 for sure is number one. Number two, vitamin D, because everybody's deficient in vitamin D. So get outside, get a supplement, use a fortified milk. I really love Ripple Kids. It's like one of the best plant-based milks. It's fortified. It's almost nutritionally like identical to whole milk, except it doesn't have saturated fat or cholesterol. It doesn't have growth hormones, antibiotics, or bacteria in it. And it also has DHA. So most of the time, what I tell people is like, if your child is over age 1, get them off of whatever they're drinking and put them on Ripple Kids because it's or even like the full fat Oatly, just because it's nutritionally, I feel like the best thing ever. Like, it used to be that dairy milk was like this nutritional way to get all of this into your kid, like protein, fat, calcium. And I think like historically it might have been the best choice for that. But I think anymore we have these options that just don't come with all of these other issues that dairy can cause. So we talked about B12, vitamin D. Iodized salt is another one. So iodine is a mineral or a mineral, an element that is usually used for cleaning, like in agricultural factories or like in animal ag, they'll use iodine to sterilize stuff. So they clean things with iodine, and that's how people are getting it through their food. And you don't need a ton. It's like a tiny little daily dose, but iodine deficiency is a big deal and it can cause some thyroid problems. So if you're fully vegan, you're not getting iodine from your food. And so my recommendation is just use iodized salt. And the reason is that supplementing iodine can, like, you can run into trouble because if you go too high, like if you're ending up with too much, then your thyroid doesn't work properly. And if you don't get enough, your thyroid doesn't work properly either. So you just need like a tiny amount every day. So I just say like iodize the salt that's on your table and use a little bit and it's completely fine. And I think that's it. I mean, calcium people ask about a lot, but I think like the calcium that you can get from fruits, veggies, fortified plant-based milks is fantastic. And I think for most kids, it's enough. And I think Sersie, so there's this tool you can use called Chronometer. It's a free software where you can like track everything that you ate in a day. And a while ago, I did it as an experiment for my son just to see like where he was, because you can put in your weight, your age, so you can kind of backdate it for a child. And it was really interesting to see like a day that I just kind of let him take the reins and I was like, all right, this is like a normal eating day for him. He didn't eat that great. He didn't eat terrible. Like, let's just see where he landed. He was hitting every single nutrient requirement all by himself. And so I think it's helpful to remember, like as a parent, you can kind of have these things in mind. Like, okay, I know my kid needs B12. I know they need iodized salt. I'm going to try and give them some protein and some fiber today. But I think like the more we can kind of back off and not worry about it and just trust like our kids know what to do and their bodies are sort of designed to eat when they're hungry and quit when they're full. And the less we interfere with that process, like the longer that sort of auto-regulation can continue. And so I think that's really important to remember too.
Yeah, that's good. Because I guess if you're creating that environment for healthy choices, plant-based choices, and they're navigating towards it. But what about making it fun for kids? What's the concept of having kids in the kitchen? How do you get your kids in the kitchen with you? Speak a little bit about how you can make this a family affair.
Yeah, totally. So I think one way to think about it is that like there's just a lot of steps that go into putting a meal together and feeding your family. And so I want my kids personally, I want my kids to understand that it's sort of a labor of love, and I want to instill like that gratitude, because I think the thing that's so triggering for moms or for parents is like, you put this meal together and your kid's just like, I'm not going to deal with it. I don't want to eat that. And you're like, but I have worked so hard to put this together. I planned it out. I went to the store. I came home. I organized all the stuff. I paid for everything. I, put the groceries away, and then I planned this meal, and I cooked and I served, and I'm going to clean up. And like, there's just a lot of steps. And I think the more we can involve our kids at every phase of that, the easier it is for them to understand like this piece that like we should be so grateful to have the choices that we have, that we, have so many opportunities to decide what we're going to eat and how much. And we're not going hungry, and we're thinking consciously about what we eat, and we can go to the grocery store and get pretty much any ingredient that we need at any time, and that we can afford it. And so all of these things I really like to involve my kids in. Not necessarily because it's fun for them, maybe it is, but it's because I want them to understand how much effort goes into this. But they also do have a ton of fun with it. So like, I know if I take my kids to Whole Foods with me and put them in the grocery cart, they're going to eat an awesome snack while we're there. Like, they're going to eat their way through the produce section. They're probably going to ask me for a vegan croissant. They're going to leave there full. So like, it's a fun experience for them. And I think just like allowing them to do that, I don't think anybody cares. Like, you're going to pay for the groceries at the end. Like, it's probably all good. I mean, if you have qualms about it, I think that's fine too. But like, anyway, for us, we just kind of do it that way. But, and then I bring them home, I talk to my kids about what they want to eat. Like, I ask them like, what sounds good for dinner? And what do you want me to include in this? Would you rather that I put broccoli or carrots into this or whatever? And just kind of give them little choices as much as I can along the way. For like noodles and things like that, I always let them choose what shape they want. So you go down the pasta aisle and there's like 50 different choices, from lasagna noodles to like wheels, or, I don't know, fettuccine, whatever the other choices are, and let them choose. And then I have them help me like as much as I can. And I'll give them little tasks like, okay, I'm going to have you stir this. And sometimes I'll break it into two. Like if I'm baking bread or something, or a muffin batter, I'll put the batter in two bowls so they can each stir one of them and just combine them at the end, or, something like that. And I have them help me with cleanup too. I think cleanup is kind of an opportunity where we can really get our kids involved to help them understand just all the effort. But I think the biggest thing is phrasing it like, who's going to help me, or who has to help me with this? Like, I would say, treat these little opportunities as a privilege for your child. So who's going to get to put the forks back in the drawer tonight? Or who's going to help me with the bubbles? And who's going to get to be the dryer? And I think then the kids are like, this is awesome. I can take responsibility for this and make it really fun. And so as much as you can like offer rewards for that kind of stuff afterwards, I think it's really helpful too. But, I think it's made a big difference just in like the attitude around meal times for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to I'm sorry, I want to pivot back to the supplementation, or the nutrient question. You
Sure.
mentioned iodine and iodized salt. What's your take on sea vegetables like nori seaweed as a source of iodine for kids?
Yeah, great. It's an awesome source. I think that's
Yeah.
completely fine. Yeah, if your kids will eat it and they like it, go to town, no
Yeah.
problem.
And then you mentioned EPA DHA supplementation in the context of ADHD. What about, if it's just kind of a normal situation where, it's not an ADHD, scenario, but you're looking at supplementation. Should parents supplement with, EPA DHA, whether it's a algae-based supplement, or what would be your take on that?
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, they're great. They're healthy for brain development, eye development. I think especially in the first 2 years of life is the recommendation. And so you can supplement either with like an actual supplement from a bottle, or you can, find a fortified plant-based milk like Ripple Kids. And I think all of it is fine. A lot of baby formulas are already fortified with DHA as well. And so, yeah, it's a great option.
Okay.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right. So tell us where the audience can find you if they want to learn more about the tips and tricks and how to get your kids to eat plant forward or eat fully plant-based. Tell us where they can find you, your blog, your group, and everything
Yay.
you're doing.
Yeah, I would love that. So you can always find me. I'm on social, but my website is mightyroots.org. And that's sort of the brand. And you'll find all kinds of stuff there. So there's a blog there. I also have a meal planner that I just came out with recently that I think is really helpful for people because it just kind of walks you through some of the steps that we talked about. So you can grab that there. And then I also host an online course for families. It's a 5-week kind of self-paced online course that's just going to be a deep dive into like all this stuff. So goal setting and sort of setting your limits and realizing kind of where you're headed and how to find sources of support. Anything from all of that to a deep dive into kids' nutrition. So we talk about all of it, like vitamins, minerals, micronutrients, macronutrients, fiber, calories, all that stuff for different ages and stages, and how to do it on a plant-based diet. There's a lot about the science behind this for kids and why this is a great idea and how really it's an evidence-based lifestyle. Like this is the kindest lifestyle, the most sustainable lifestyle, but it's also completely safe for anyone at any age, as long as you have the right information. And so I'm here to help with that. And then what else do? We do a lot of like kind of practical stuff. So like how to put together a kid's plate. What are some meal ideas that you want to try? The course also comes with 2 different recipe books. The meal planner is included in the course. And then I think the most powerful thing, at least for me, that has been just amazing is the weekly Q&A. So every week we get together for an hour and people can just like ask whatever questions they have. A lot of times we're just like hanging out, talking about how our kid had a complete nuclear meltdown at dinner and what we're going to do about it next time, or just things like that, to have this kind of camaraderie between all these moms that are on this journey together. And I think for me, that has been like amazing. It's been so wonderful to see Sersie there every week, pretty much, and kind of get to know her. But yeah, I would love to have you there. It's, you know, this is my new baby. And so for now, anybody that enrolls will get lifetime access to everything, because I'm sort of developing and kind of tweaking and updating stuff as we go. But I would love to see you on the inside. So if you have any questions, just find me on social. It's mighty.roots on Instagram. And I would love to see you there. So
Awesome.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you guys so much for having me. It's been really fun to talk to you, and it was nice to meet you, Gigi.
Oh, you